Welcome, my friend, to Next Level Change Success, a change conversation for leaders, project and change practitioners for today and tomorrow. My name is Therese Perez of myvirtualchangemanager.com, and I'm an experienced change and project professional and people leader with many years of experience in the industry. I love business and I love the people side of business especially. So nothing lights me up more than seeing people use change management, project management and strong change leadership to engage, motivate and inspire people and ultimately transform organisations. If you've heard about change management and have no idea of what it involves, then you're in the right place. If you know about change management, but you want to take your practices to the next level, then this is where you should be. I'm going to share the stories of my experiences, interview some fantastic people, and I'm going to explore all of the challenges and opportunities that you face in organisations right now. So please join me and let's go and have some fun. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Next Level Change Success. My name is Therese Perez, and I am the founder of myvirtualchangemanager.com. I'm very excited about this podcast series. Before I begin, though, I would like to acknowledge that I'm recording on Tharawal country and pay my respects to the traditional owners and custodians on the land on which I am recording. So today we're talking about HR change, operating model change, and some of the key pitfalls that people experience when undertaking such change. And I really want to talk about this because our whole logo and our whole byline is change matters because people matter. And there's no bigger impact that happens to people than when there's an operating model change in your organization, because people's roles, their livelihoods are affected if there are redundancies, change of roles, people having to apply for their own jobs again. And I'm talking about this through a multifaceted lens. I've experienced an impact to my own role and firsthand and around what that means if you're made redundant. I want to talk about it from a leader's perspective insofar as the leadership challenges and what you need to do as a leader. Then also as someone who supported operating model changes from a change perspective. And this is a really big topic, so I'm going to charge through it a little bit about the challenges and give you some of those key tips. But definitely go to myvirtualchangemanager.com. We have a checklist to see where your change in particular is up to and whether there are things that you can look to address, whether you're a leader, whether you're a HR business partner or people and culture business partner as the term goes nowadays, or whether you're someone who's managing change in an operating model environment and an operating model change. Okay, so let's get into it. Some of the key pitfalls. One is not communicating enough. And this is really interesting from a people perspective at a time where there's major uncertainty around your own role. Whether you're a talented individual or a person who is perhaps not even performing, it doesn't matter. People need information. And in times of HR and operating model changes, it's when leaders get really scared. HR practitioners get really scared. They don't want to communicate because they feel like they've got nothing to communicate. Yet it's important to keep those communication lines open. Absolutely critical. The whole foundation and the approach that we take from my virtual change manager and from the experience that I've had is that you need to respect every individual through this process. You should have care and you should have empathy. This isn't a punitive process and it should never be a punitive process. So when it comes to communication, that's a sign of respect for individuals, that you're touching base with them and that you're opening up those communication lines, whether it be individual, as a team, as a department, or as a division. It's actually about making sure those lines of communication are open. You also need to ensure that you have the right support structures and accessibility for all of your team members to actually access those support services, employee assistance programs and such what. You can have them present on site so that people could walk into that room if they needed to seek counsel or guidance from their own perspective. Of course, you need to, one of the pitfalls is leaders not really understanding the HR process or the obligations, and a briefing between the people and culture business partners and the leaders who are managing the change or needing to communicate the change is really critical about what they can say, what they can't say. And really this comes down to whether you feel like that's legalese and you're just trying to protect the organization. The reality is that it can be very confusing for people who are going through this type of change when they get mixed messages. The people and culture business partner saying one thing, for example, and then their direct leader who's trying to take them through the change, committing to other things. Becomes confusing. It opens the organization up for exposure. And in all reality, when it comes down to legislation and regulation about how HR and people and culture, like those rules, are applied to individuals, oftentimes it's just about fairness, respect, and equity. And it's really, really important that those processes are followed. I've definitely worked with key HR specialists, some fantastic ones throughout my career, who've been very, very diligent around making sure that processes are followed. Even if people leaders are like, look, can't I just give that person that role because I want them to have it, which is part of the conversation that can happen at times. It's actually about going through due process. And that really does help mitigate and alleviate those pressures around being able to move to a future state structure. If you haven't followed due process, that means that essentially people can appeal decisions, they can challenge the decision making that's happening if they wish, and that can get you caught in all sorts of logistics and issues when if you just had a follow due process, you wouldn't be in that situation in the first place. One of the key things I'm proud of is having worked on an operating model change, and there were absolutely no appeals at the end of that process because the process was followed to a T, and really respectfully, regardless of the outcomes. And that's what you really should put as a key achievement or a key outcome, that you want to make sure that everyone is going through that process in a fair and equitable way. Now, of course, I'm talking in an Australian context, but you might be overseas and there might be different regulations. But the reality is if you can essentially have people leave the organization in a respectful way, they may not be happy about it, but it's about whether you can undertake that process respectfully. It allows those who are remaining, who sometimes have that survivor guilt, that they can actually move forward in a cohesive way and rebuilding can happen. Because through all operating model changes, there is an impact to productivity. And that's what I also want to touch on. You need to ensure that when you're looking at the aggressive programs or projects that an organization's undertaking, if you're choosing to change the structure during that process, the reality is that your productivity and the organization's ability to deliver services kind of goes into almost survival mode. You're looking at moving back potentially to an MVP if you're not going to invest in change management to ensure that there's a smooth transition and that there's positive outcomes. You need to revisit all the processes. If you're closing down departments, if you're devolving teams, you need to have a look at what that impact is and manage that effectively. Now, if you have an aggressive project or program framework that you're looking to deliver to from an enterprise perspective, during that time, you need to understand that there is no way that you can deliver on that. You might be able to outsource some of that work, which will alleviate some of the issues, but eventually it takes its toll because people can't move pieces forward because you're losing IP, you're losing subject matter experts, whether you like it or not. There are people who leave during that process who you may not want to leave, but because of the uncertainty or the treatment and what people witness, they may choose not to be part of your organization if you don't handle it well. So another positive outcome that you should be striving for is retention of talent and performance during that time frame. Once again, you will never achieve that if you do not have change people involved, if you don't have the caliber of change people required, as well as a combination of the right leadership during that time frame where everyone's working to the same end, which is the respectful treatment of those who are impacted, as well as continuing to perform across the organization. The energy that is required during this time from a people leader, a change manager, but also the emotional energy that takes its toll across the organization can also not be discounted. You have to think about the emotional toll that leaders will be taking during this time. And for those leaders who will be remaining and reforming teams, essentially transitioning people respectfully, having other teams fall under them, and then trying to rebuild the team, that takes a lot of energy for individuals and for managers and leaders. So if you're in that seat, what I say is please take care of yourself through this process. It's important that you also take care of not just others, but yourself. Have clear boundaries around what you take on and what you don't, and have that clear communication with your line manager about what you need through this time. It can lead to burnout. And certainly I've had instances where as a change practitioner, it has absolutely led to burnout for myself, because I am an extremely caring individual and empathetic towards others, and as a result of that, at times I haven't been firm enough with my own boundaries, nor prioritizing my own caretaking. I've wanted to make sure that everyone else was okay before myself, and so I guess I broke the rule that you get told in the aeroplane around if you start going down, put the mask on yourself and then your child. Definitely for me, I was definitely putting the mask on others before myself. And that meant that I couldn't really go the distance, or if I did, I needed a long break between these transformational pieces of work. Over time, I've understood better and been able to manage through just repetitive experience my own boundaries. But I do encourage you that if you are in that space, that you also need to take care of yourself, because you will pay too high a price and then you won't get to enjoy a positive outcome that might result from such changes. So that's really important as well. So make sure that you communicate, and even when you're afraid to communicate, you need to check in with people. Make sure that you're not then overloading all of the organization with a major delivery or transformation piece of work while you're also changing your structures. It's just not possible to get traction or deliver when you have changing seats happening and you don't have the subject matter expertise. Make sure that you have clear outcomes that you want to achieve around engagement, when you want to ensure that people are treated respectfully, that you want to maintain performance. These are the things that, as if you're clear on your outcomes, everyone can lean into those. And then I just also want to talk about the care for leaders. Obviously, leaders also require care through this process, as well as team members. That's really, really important. And the change practitioner, of course, because of the loads that can sometimes be carried by those roles. But then let's also talk about how you manage the emotional reaction through these type of changes, because that is part of the load that leaders, change practitioners and others who are left behind, they carry that load. And it's important to set up the right structures to enable the emotional spectrum to play through for this change. There won't be ever, I think, a change that really does disrupt individuals more than a structure change. And it's important to acknowledge that, lean into that, and from a change plan perspective, set up enough forums and support systems for individuals and teams through this process. And so let's go through some of those forums that you can set up. Individual one-on-ones, of course. After you have an announcement, definitely having a checkpoint and what I call decompression session is really, really important, because whether it's immediately after as a subgroup or if it's a divisional level, then you might actually then have a debrief departmental wise. And then obviously talking to individuals is really important, and how you sequence the conversations between individuals who are impacted as well as in the broader groups. And always giving those individuals a choice to attend those broader group forums is really important. And I certainly know that the worst thing, if you're actually directly impacted, that someone can do is not give you the option to attend those forums and let you know that, yes, you're on the list for that forum. Just, up to you whether you want to attend or not. Those presumptive measures of, no, you may not want that person in the forum, I think it's really disrespectful. And certainly I can talk about personal experience here around people making decisions for you through that process. When you're a leader and you're impacted, leaders will either opt out and say, no, I don't want to be part of that, and obviously have a strong emotional reaction if their role is impacted. But certainly I've always found for myself, and I really pride myself on this, is the professionalism. I have been impacted when it comes down to redundancy, and I've wanted to still remain a leader because I take that role extremely seriously. It's a privilege, and I wanted to make sure that my team, who were greatly impacted, were taken care of through that process. And I could only do that if I showed up. Now, of course, my team's reflection to me at the time was I needed to take care of myself, and they couldn't believe that I was still showing up and just checking in for them. But the reality is that might have been a coping mechanism at the time. But I also knew what it's like when you get left behind through these processes. It happened a number of times in my career, when you want to make sure that you're seeing the person, that they're okay. And of course, at times I was very wobbly with my team, and there might be judgment around that others might hold around, well, don't show up if you're not going to be emotionally okay to show up. But I just think it's important to be authentic, and I wasn't looking to lean on my team, but there were definitely emotions in relation to redundancy. You go into that sense of rejection, etc. But the worst thing that a leader can do is that who's running the show, I guess, is to not include you in those conversations, not even give you an option to turn up. And that can obviously damage the brand of that individual who's leading the process through not giving the option. So important that is respected through the process as well, if individuals wanted to attend, if it's a longer runoff. Now, of course, in Australia, we talk about the sunset period, or going on gardening leave, that's what they call it, where essentially you get paid and for an extended period of time, but you're not needing to turn up to work, and that you can just return your things during that time. It is a good option for individuals who might find it far too stressful to remain in the organisation and to show up. But I think that's by agreement, once again, with the individual. Some people still like to turn up and still connect into an organisation, but it does have to be a win-win, and sometimes the call has to be made about the person taking an early exit from the organisation. Of course, the other areas, and because of where that this podcast goes internationally, is that in your organisation or in your country, you may have the right to just exit people and exit them on the day. And you may choose to do that, but if you have a strong connection with your people, you can make sure that and check in after the fact that they're okay. Sometimes redundancies have to happen, and as part of organizational efficiencies and reviews and evolutions. It's just reality. And I think there's a really high statistic around the number of people who experience this redundancy process in their lifetime. So it's just about doing it respectfully, making sure you check in with people, and encouraging them to reach out for support or assistance if you're able to provide that. So there's hopefully some hints and tips for you around HR processes and change of people and organizational structures, and how you can handle them better. All I can say is that if you're really focused on productivity and efficiency, by handling this well, your organization can really evolve fast, and the trust doesn't get broken through that process. I absolutely have worked on change and transformation where we've improved staff engagement results as a result of delivering on a organizational change in a respectful way, and where individuals felt very validated for those who were waiting for the environment to improve and for a change to take place. So I hope you've enjoyed the episode, received some key tips around in a pragmatic and practical way about how you can improve and deliver a really powerful HR change, and the things to do, the things not to do. And if you're interested, we do have blueprints for different types of change at myvirtualchangemanager.com. So we try and take all the hard work out of what to do and how to approach these type of changes. Of course, as I mentioned before, the sensitivities around the HR landscape always be across the legislation in a local way. Take the time, if you're a P&C business partner, to take leaders through that. It's important that all leaders during these types of change know the guidelines and follow them for sure. And the reason why we really want to talk about this is because, as I mentioned at the very beginning, this is one of the most impactful changes to people's careers and also to individuals on a whole range of levels. And we want to make sure that people can handle this type of change more and more in a constructive, respectful fashion. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Come visit us at myvirtualchangemanager.com. Tune in again to Next Level Change Success. We're going to continue this series of talking about specific types of changes and the ways that you can approach them. And jump onto our website for tools and training in relation to this type of change, because it's really, really important. And why does change matter? Because your people matter. Have a great day, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.